My name is Jennifer Allaby. I'm originally from St. John, New Brunswick. I currently live in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan, but that's just the last in a long list of places where I've lived, primarily in the Arctic, Yukon, northern bits of different provinces. I was a social worker by trade. I'm currently retired. And, I've been with my partner for 21 years. We have 2 dogs and a cat. That's really me in a nutshell. I love to travel. I love the North. I spent my career working with First Nations and Indigenous peoples around the country. I'm always up for learning new things. My first degree is in history. My second degree was in social work. That's pretty much. I first went north when I was 14 as part of a school exchange trip. There were 14 of us that went. I was in grade 9, and we went to a community called Pengnuktung, which at the time had about roughly 900 people living in it. We were there for 10 days, and that experience pretty much set me up for life for what I was going to do. I didn't realize I'd end up being a social worker. That wasn't the goal at that time, of course. But all I knew is that I was going to be spending a lot of time in the Arctic when I graduated from high school. Definitely the sense of place and the sense of belonging and the sense of community. People have asked me, well, why do they live there? There's nothing there. And it's like, everything is there. We're the ones who barely have anything in terms of what makes a successful human being a human being. Most of the cultures, in fact, Inuit, just the word itself just means people. It's not, it's not a designation outside of the fact that they're human beings. So that connection with the land, for one thing, is still strong. A lot of the self-government aspects are very positive, very encouraging. They're absolutely person-centered and family-centered and community-centered. It's just these, concentric circles moving out from the individual isn't necessarily the most important thing. The family is not necessarily the most important thing. The community is probably the most important thing. And when things hit the fan, the community pulls together. That's pretty important. You just feel that sense of place so strongly and so keenly that, there's very few places like it. There's very few places that actually have that. To belong to the community, do what the people do. Recognizing 100% at all times that you are a guest, and you don't have all the answers, and what your role is, you have to be very clear what your role is. Your role is really only as a facilitator. You're not there to solve anything. You're not there to tell anybody how to do anything. You're there to listen, you're there to learn, and you do your best to, well, really, you do your best to let people laugh at you, because you're going to make some really stupid mistakes and they aren't going to let you forget it. My first community, experience with that was, my friends that I was actually, they became my friends, the people I was babysitting for initially. One of the elders up the road had heard, that I was there, that there was this new person there, and they wanted to meet me. So my friends took me over there. And they had just come back from a hunt, and I went into the house, and everybody's sitting on the floor. There's not a stick of furniture in the place. There's probably 24 people in there, One guy says, you know, snack bar is in the kitchen. You go into the kitchen, there's a blue tarp on the floor with a walrus laid out on it and a knife stuck in it. And, you know, it's like, okay. And like somebody else, some little kid had come in behind me and picked up the knife, took a piece, ate it, went back in the other room. So I did the same thing. I'd never eaten walrus before. I mean, cripes, I was from a city in New Brunswick, you know, like this had never happened to me before. And it's like, well, everybody's looking at me. So, you know, I did it and I ate it, and they just burst out laughing because they know, you know, that this is not something that, you know, the average Kaglunak, which is a white person, would just do. And that was it. When you just do what the people do and respect that is the way it's done. You don't turn your nose up at anything. If there's customs that they follow, you follow them. If there's things you can learn, you learn them. You have to leave your biases at the door. You got to be open to new experiences, and that's how you get along. That's how you get welcomed. You know, if they have the impression that you're there because you have, as is commonly called, you know, the savior complex, that you're there to save them from something, they don't need saving from anything. They have the solutions. You know, your job is really just to kind of pull them together. But even then, you're just one of the team that does that, and the majority of the team is the community. Teenager, that level of acceptance and absolutely not caring one whit where you're from, you know, like we went there and there was nothing, there was like zero awkwardness, like zero. The teenagers there, they weren't like, because that's who mainly we hung out with or whatever, they just went about their daily lives and didn't treat us as anything special. It's like, well, come with me if you want to, but if you don't, that's up to you. Because that's the sort of thinking that pervades the community, is like every person just has the ability to do what they want, and if they don't want, no one says anything. It's that kind of freedom that you cannot find, you know, in so many places. And that's what I craved, was just that freedom, the ability to, you know, if I wanted to go fishing with people, I went. If I didn't, they didn't hold it against me. It wasn't a big deal. You know, day to day, you just, I don't know, there's always something to do, which is very strange. You know, people don't think, like, you know, they think of it as just being like white and, you know, snowy and whatever. But the amount of socializing that goes on in a community that's isolated, and especially when I lived there and we had, you know, CBC and that was it, nobody was sitting at home watching their TV. Everybody was always out doing something, you know, and especially in the wintertime, that's where you did the majority of your visiting. In the summer, everybody's gone off on the land. The biggest part of it is the sense of freedom. If people don't have the sense of freedom to explore or to play or to be on their own, then no, they don't learn how to socialize, how to deal with conflict, how to support each other, how to stand up for each other, how to stand up for themselves. You know, if there's always some kind of intervention or, you know, programmed activity, we'll say, you know, kids don't grow up learning how to socialize. And that is the advantage, I think, that people my age and a little bit younger and a little bit older, not too much older, because they find, well, like my parents, for example, find technology just completely baffling. But, you know, things that we take for granted. We didn't grow up with computers. We grew up knowing how to socialize with our friends. We grew up knowing how to scrap in the schoolyard and make up later. You know, we knew how to have arguments and resolve issues amongst each other. We knew these things, but they were always face to face, right? Sometimes you might get a prank phone call, but generally when somebody was cutting you down, it was face to face. and you stood there and you dealt with it, or you didn't. But even if you didn't deal with it right then, it was not the same as the anonymity that these kids today have to deal with. And they don't have the social skills that we had because they just, because their lives have been so structured that they don't know how to have conflict with people and resolve things. And that is a big part of being in a community. I mean, these things are not always smooth. I mean, we see it at all levels of politics in our workplaces, for example. Part of the problem nowadays is the people who are, considered millennials, 30 and younger, really don't have the conflict resolution skills required to make a workplace work. It's not their fault. It's just the way society has shifted, Can we get it back? Sure. Let kids eat dirt. Let them go out to play. Let them drink from the garden hose. Yeah, it tastes rank, but you learn from these things. You learn from falling off your bike because, I never had training wheels on my bike. I fell a lot, but I sure learned how to ride, in the end. Cuts and bruises and broken bones and whatever. I mean, they're all part of developing some resilience in you. And if you don't have resilience, you have no connection to your community whatsoever, as far as I'm concerned.